Jack Winchester struck the golf ball effortlessly with his 9-iron and watched the ball he hadn't felt rise into the blue June sky and smiled. "I say, good shot, Winchester," exclaimed Barrington, his big fat friend from behind him. The two alcoholics watched the ball bounce just before the green and roll up nicely for what would be surely a put-in. "Not bad, hey? Yes, I do say the best shot I've hit all year," said Winchester, stroking his moustache that went out of fashion in the summer of 1989, but nobody had told him. The two men hopped into their golf buggy, doing very little to help their impending heart attacks. Jack Winchester could smell the brandy coming from Bob Barrington, who could barely fit on the vehicle, mainly because his own breath smelt strongly of gin, just like it did every morning, and Barrington couldn't smell the gin coming from Winchester, because he couldn't give a shit about how Winchester smelt. "Geez, it really is a scorcher today, right? Bloody lovely day for golf," said Barrington. "Thank God I'm here, not inside with my so-called wife who flicks through that TV mag, sighing at everything, saying she's bored but doing nothing about it. Ugh, couldn't cope with that. Not on a beautiful day like today," said Winchester. Barrington laughed. "Oh no, my old boy, don't you worry. Nearly on the last hole now. We'll be drinking a nice cold one in the sun in that beer garden in no time," said Barrington. "Fantastic stuff," said Winchester. The two men made their way onto the green and examined their shots. Winchester's was truly remarkable, just 2 yards from the hole. Barrington's was more difficult, about 15 yards away. If he made the shot, he would have been beyond chuffed. "Go on, put me out my misery and sink yours, old boy," said Barrington. With a smile, Winchester stepped up to his ball, lined up his putter and put the thing in. But something was strange. It barely made a sound as it entered the hole, with the flag still in it. "Played, Winchester," said Barrington. Winchester stooped over and dipped his hand into the hole, but there was something else in there. A little surprised, he pulled away. He looked at his fingers, and stuck to them was something sticky, and something brown. "Wait, what?" said Barrington. But it really was. Brown, stinking shit stuck to his fingers. "Oh dear God!" shouted Winchester, getting on his knees like a much younger man, and wiping his hand on the grass still dewy from the morning. "It can't be! I don't understand!" exclaimed Barrington. "But it is! I can smell it! Oh, Jesus Christ! But how? How has an animal been able to get itself over the hole? You know, with the flag still in it and do its business. It just doesn't make any sense, does it?" said Barrington. At that moment, Winchester looked at his fingers with a new disdain. "No, that's because it wasn't an animal. At least not of the kind you're thinking," said Winchester, feeling sadder now more than angry. "No, it can't be. Who would do such a thing? Who would be so disgusting?" said Barrington. Little to their knowledge, that person was lying dead several hundred meters away, and tied to a chair above the corpse was a friend of theirs, naked and blindfolded, sweating pure fear, wincing at their rotting friend in the summer heat. 72 hours earlier. Across town, the smell of smoke filled a basement, along with a whiff of damp. A French girl called Toulouse blew smoke out the door that led to steps into the front garden of the house. Her female friends lounged on dirty leather sofas, drinking cheap lager and throwing their empty cans across the room. A huge television played Family Guy, but nobody was watching that. They were all chatting shit. "Oh man, does anyone fancy going out tonight?" said Carl, downing his last bit of crappy beer. "Hey, I've got an idea. How about we don't get drunk and we actually do something tomorrow? It'll be Saturday. Uni's basically finished. I mean, we must have had a hangover every Saturday for 2 years. You're off work, aren't you, Carl? So let's actually do something for once," said Marco. "Like what? Tennis?" said Carl. "No, something different. I want an adventure," said Marco. "Well, go on then. What are you thinking?" said Carl, reaching for another can from the crate that laid in the centre of the room, waiting there ready for anyone who wanted refreshment. "Oh, I know. We should go to an adventure park," said Toulouse in her thick French accent, flicking her cigarette and closing the door, joining the men on the sofas. "She means a theme park, guys. You know, roller coasters," said Ray. Oui, a theme park," said Toulouse. "And no, I'm not driving for hours for that," said Ray. "Oh, why not?" said Toulouse. "Because I want a few more of these," said Ray, getting up and taking a can from the crate. "Nah, I wasn't really thinking of that kind of thing anyway. I want to do something new, do something different," said Marco. "Come on then, ideas," said Carl. "I don't know, like camping?" "Camping? Okay, cool. Problem, there's no campsite," said Carl. "Yeah, even better," said Marco, grinning. "Yeah, true, I like it. Shame we haven't got a tent though." "I'd be well up for that," said Carl. "Oh, but we have," said Ray, taking a drink of beer. Camping? Is that tents? Said Toulouse, pulling funny eyebrows. That's the one, said Ray, letting out a little belch. What? You've got a tent? Inquired Marco. Yep. Me and my mate from back home had the similar idea a few weeks back, but when it came to it, we just got wrecked on whiskey and ended up going to a nightclub. When he left a couple of days later, he forgot to take his tent, so yeah, it's just sitting there in my room, said Ray. Well, this is interesting, said Marco, stroking his chin like an evil Bond villain. But the problem is, where exactly could we go? Said Carl. The 4 students sat there and pondered for a moment. The university year was just about over. They had just a few lingering bits of work to hand in before they could leave for the summer. The chain-smoking French girl Toulouse planned to stay. She had got a job in a little cafe, and her parents were travelling the Americas, so it made little sense to go back to France. Marco would be heading back to Wales in a couple of weeks, back to the valleys as he would say. Ray would be heading back to his summer job, back home that is, helping his father sell antiques, and Carl would be stopping here as well. He had gotten a weekend job just before Christmas at a corner shop where he would just read papers all day. The owner had said if he stayed in town, he would up his hours to almost full time. Carl had agreed. This meant he could keep seeing a girl he was getting close to he'd met a couple months before in town. You know what? I think I know where we could go camping, said Carl. Where? Said Marco. So, a couple Sundays back I was walking back from Haley's because the bus service wasn't working. So I thought, what the hell, I'll take a walk. And I knew it was like a 2-hour walk, but it was a decent day. So anyway, there's this golf course on the other side of town. And right beside it there's this woods. It's quite big. I think if we went, nobody would find us in there. Especially not at night, said Kyle. A wood? Said Toulouse. You know, a forest, but smaller, said Ray. Toulouse smiled at him. He gave her a wink that said, I got your back. Yeah, that could be the one, said Marco. And at the revelation, he decided to treat himself to a beer. I don't know. You know, golfers, they're not the kind of guys you want to annoy, said Ray. Yeah, exactly. That's why you want to annoy them. But it doesn't matter anyway. We'll be there at night. They won't even know, said Carl. Yeah, fair point. I guess I'm in, said Ray. Yeah, I'm game too, said Marco. Well, looks like I don't really have a choice, does it? What about you, Toulouse? Said Carl. Camping out in some woods at night? Is this allowed? Well, no, not really, said Marco. Oh, I do not know. What if someone gets us? What, like who? Said Ray. Like a madman, said Toulouse half joking. Oh, really? You do watch too many horror films, said Ray, rolling his eyes. Oui, and you used to like watching them with me, said Toulouse. The words she used lingered heavy on the air. There used to be a thing between Ray and Toulouse. It had all happened in the first year of university. They had been inseparable, so together they had made friends. But as love dwindled, they still had to see each other if they wanted to remain social. They kept a good balance, at least on the surface it seemed adult and amiable. But who really knew what was bubbling beneath the surface? Oh, come on, Toulouse. 3 big strapping lads like us. Well, said Marco, looking at Carl on purpose, having a dig. The pair of them was always taking pop shots at each other, the way 2 good friends do. Whatever, Marco. We all know I'd kick your head in, said Carl, smiling and drinking some beer. Shut up, said Marco, throwing his empty beer can lightly his way. At that moment, Toulouse was looking at her phone. She had gotten up Google Maps and was looking at an aerial shot of the golf course with the woods beside it. You mean here? Said Toulouse, leaning over Ray and handing her phone to Carl. Toulouse's hand rested high on Ray's thigh. Carl examined the screen. That looks like the place, and the woods look bigger than I thought. There'll be no problem if we decided to actually go. Hey, I thought we'd already decided. Not chickening out, are you? Scared some maniac's going to get you? Don't worry, Carl. I think you're safe even from rape, said Marco, laughing. What the hell? Where did that come from? I'm coming, geez, calm down, said Carl, finishing his can, crushing it in his hand and lightly throwing it back at Marco. Okay, I will come. But what are we going to do when we get there? Said Toulouse. You know, said Marco. No, not really, said Toulouse. Well, I can build a pretty good fire if that needs to be. It's been pretty hot lately, so shouldn't be a problem, said Ray. Well, nice one then. It's settled. Camping tomorrow, said Marco. The next day, as the town's hustle and bustle dwindled, 4 students in shorts and shades walked out of the back of their house into town. The sky was beginning to turn an orange colour as they set out on their destination. The men took turns to carry their gear, a big blue tent and 2 rucksacks, one with water and one with food. They had overpacked, taking too much precaution doing something they weren't used to doing. Toulouse led from the front, with a phone in hand, tracking down the right way with Google Maps. looking over her shoulder in her big black sunglasses, saying, "This way, that way." The men followed, switching bags. Nobody wanted to carry the water for too long as it was heaviest. They had soon left the part of town they all knew well, from the many drunken nights they had spent in its streets, and was now on the other side of town they didn't really know that well at all. The four marched under a dwindling summer sky, and then they were there. They looked down a very long driveway towards a huge Victorian house with a car park in front of it. The house was made of pale stone. It was more of a mansion than a house. They all presumed it was the place where all the golf-going-ons took place, a place that held the Christmas party, that dealt with the membership, and a place where golfers could get a drink after a round in the sun. The light was lower now. The sky had turned purple and pinkish, and the four examined the prospect in front of them. If they walked onto this property, someone might be able to see them from the house, but only if they were looking by chance. From looking at Google Maps before, they knew the golf course was behind the house. To their right was a field of grass that came up to their waists, and beyond that was the woods they wanted to get to. "What do you think?" said Marco. "I think we go for it. Keep low in this grass, a little jog. We could be in them woods in a minute, and no one would see us," said Carl. "Hole 19, said Ray. "What?" said Marco. "That's what that sign says outside the house. Hole 19, said Ray. "You can see that? Damn, you got good eyesight," said Marco. "I do not get it," said Toulouse. "Golf courses are made up of 18 holes, so they've called that place Hole 19. Get it?" said Ray. "Ah, oui, said Toulouse. "So, we going for it, guys?" said Carl. "Wait, I'm scared," said Toulouse, laughing a little. "Too late. Right, come on, keep low," said Carl. The four crept across the summer grass under a multicoloured sky and headed for the woods. Without any disturbance, they made it. They took a little wonder, never heading too deep into the woods. They walked until they could see the edge of the golf course. Through the trees, they could see it was deserted. They could see a nicely cut grass, the beautifully placed trees, and the yellow sandpits. When they had found a nice flat spot for the tent, they dumped their things, then walked up to the edge of the course and admired its beauty. "Nice, isn't it? I don't know much about golf, but this is a good course. You'd have to have some serious money to play here, I think," said Carl. "The rich bastards," said Marco. "Come on, let's have a little walk on it. Nobody's going to see us," said Carl. The four walked onto the first green they saw. In the distance, they could see a sign at the start of the hole stating they were on hole 16. "You know it will be hilarious," said Carl. "What's that?" said Ray. "If someone took a shit in that hole," said Carl. Immediately the others started laughing. "Imagine some rich posh toff tomorrow morning. Here he goes up here for a lovely game of Sunday golf. He's getting to the end of his game. It's been good. And then he puts his hand in to retrieve his ball and—" Marco was on his hands and knees laughing. Carl joined him with a huge belly-crunching laugh. The thought of it was too much. The idea of some pompous, smug, self-loving man with shit-stained fingers was too brilliant. Toulouse and Ray laughed, but they didn't find it quite as amusing as Carl and Marco. "I have to do it," said Carl. "No way," said Marco, smiling. The two looked each other deep in the eyes. "I'm serious. It's got to be done. I need to go anyway. I think that's why the idea popped into my mind," said Carl. "No, you are not serious," said Toulouse, pulling a face between disgusted and amused. "I'm very serious, Toulouse. You might want to head for the trees for a minute," said Carl, unbuckling his belt. "You are disgusting," she said, walking to the woods, trying to conceal her laughter. "Come on, these guys deserve it," said Carl. He took out the flag from the hole and tossed it to the ground. He then pulled down his jeans and underwear and squatted. But then he felt he might get some on his denim. So he stood back up and removed everything completely, his shoes, trousers and underwear. Covering his manhood, he squatted over the hole and began to squeeze. Marco and Ray were on the floor laughing like they had never laughed before. They were literally rolling around in fits. "Stop laughing! I can't do it," said Carl, wiping away tears of laughter that were now dripping down his face. Toulouse watched her on the edge of the woods with her arms folded, and Carl waved at her with his free hand. "You are disgusting!" she shouted. "Oh shit, here it comes," said Carl. When Marco and Ray heard the little bits of farting that went with it, it was too much for them. They had that kind of laughter that stays in your stomach and hurts, that your body can't release. "Oh, that's better," said Carl, standing up, removing his hands from his penis as all dignity had been lost anyway. He picked up the flag and went to place it back in the hole. As he did, he held it higher, creating a drama. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for the working man," he said, planting the flag back in. The four of them gathered round a big fire as darkness surrounded them. Each looked at one another as the amber glow of the fire could be seen rippling on their faces, but they were all sad and slightly tired now. "So what now?" said Carl. "I don't know. It's not often we're this sober in each other's company, is it?" said Marco. "Doesn't really matter, mate. I don't like you either way," said Carl, smiling. Are you guys sure it is safe? I keep hearing things, said Talou, wrapped up in an extra hoodie that Ray had brought. Don't worry, it's animals and stuff. Breaking twigs. There's no wolves or anything that could hurt you here, said Ray. Nah, the only thing that could hurt you here is a rabid fox, giving you a slow and torturous death. But apart from that, you should be fine. Maybe, said Carl as Marco laughed. You're a dick, said Talou. Well, aren't you guys going to love me, said Ray, standing up with a small smile, walking off into the darkness. What's he doing, said Marco. Rain came back with a bag of water, but it looked a little lighter. Don't worry, I've put the water in the tent, it's here. I have something much better. I knew this would happen, so I planned for it. He opened up the bag and pulled out a bottle of vodka, a big one. Oh, good lad, said Marco, grinning. Good thinking, Ray, said Carl. Oh no, are we going to drink it straight? I can't drink it straight, I'd be sick, said Talou. Hold your horses, woman, said Ray, pulling out a couple of 2-litre bottles of Coke. Oh, it's the real stuff, said Carl. Oh, la crème de la crème. Well done, Rayo, said Talou, taking the bottles from his hand. The four of them made their drinks and drank just like they had done 100 times before, but the fresh air and hot fire gave them a new buzz. They laughed and reminisced about all the good times over the last 2 years, how they couldn't have been happier with the friends they had made, how, after university, they would always be in contact, and would meet up once a year for the rest of their days, they all promised. That's when there was a crack louder than before coming from the darkness, just behind the tent. But none of them heard it. Marco and Carl had been laughing too loudly, remembering the present Carl had left for the golfers the next morning. Oh guys, look, don't let the fire go out, it's dwindling, said Talou, with sluggish drunk eyes. All right, I'll go get some wood, hold on, said Carl, getting up all wobbly. Don't fall, said Ray, laughing. Carl took a long laboured steps into the darkness, towards the spot he had remembered earlier where they had collected most of their wood. The others sat around, still laughing. Guys, what the hell are we doing? Said Talou, with a wide smile, drinking more vodka. I don't know, but it's brilliant, said Marco. It was then he looked up from the floor and over the fire at Talou. The heat wobbled the air. He could see her face, but his drunkenness didn't help. There was something wrong with her expression. He closed one eye to see better, but nothing changed. Why does she look terrified? Thought Marco. She can't really be pulling that expression. She can't really be looking over my shoulder in that traumatized way. It must be the alcohol and the fire distorting her face in that strange way. But her face remained that way. So he moved his head slightly to the side, past the fire to see her better. But what he saw was worse. Her mouth was open even wider than he thought, and now he could see her chest trembling. She was definitely looking at something behind him. Marco turned. Beside the tent was a man. He was tall, his hair was long, black and very greasy. On his head was a green hat with a short beak. He wore big black boots, and his hands seemed huge, his fingers abnormally long. Then Marco looked more closely at his face, just visible from the firelight. There was a patchy beard, like he didn't know how to shave properly. The skin on his cheeks was covered in scars, like acne had tormented his teenage years. He smiled slowly, revealing yellow teeth that made no sense. Whoa, fuck, said Marco instinctively, shuffling backwards. Hey, can we help you? Said Marco. But the man by the tent just stared. It then became apparent he was staring at Talou. What do you want? Said Ray. But the man just smiled an awful, cruel smile, as saliva dripped from his mouth. Look, we're just having a little fun. We don't want any trouble, said Marco. The three of them stood up and watched carefully. It was then he pulled up his striped jumper and pulled out a blade tucked into his jeans waistband. What are you doing? Shouted Ray as Talou backed up into her ex-boyfriend's arms, but the man said nothing. His smile grew larger and more saliva dripped down his chin. He stood firm, with the blade in his hands and the flames flickering orange light upon him. He then let out a deranged little laugh and took a long stride forward. Step, step, step. He shuffled quickly right at them. Run! Cried Marco. Talou was a little drunker and stumbled on a branch and crashed to the floor. It took a second for the other two to realise, only looking back when they heard her scream. The man reached down and grabbed her ankle. She turned on her back in an attempt to kick. She could barely see his face in the dark, only the pale outlines of that disturbing smile. He raised his knife high, but then there was a hollow clunking noise. The man's demeanour changed. His body went loose and he collapsed to the floor. There was someone else. He dropped some wood. The wood he'd smashed over the man's head. Carl? Come on, quick, let's go, said Carl, grabbing her arm and running to Marco and Ray. What the fuck's wrong with that guy? Said Marco. We should grab him and take that knife while he's down, said Ray. No, come on, let's leave, take no chances. We can get to that house, hole 19. Who cares what they say, it's better than getting stabbed in the dead of night. "We can get them to call the police," said Carl. Together they all ran through the dark woods, onto the golf course just visible under the moonlight. They raced across the smooth grass, heading to the big house with a distant light on in one of the downstairs rooms. They headed towards the light that appeared like a beacon of hope. As they ran, the dark details of the house began to emerge. They passed outside decking with the chairs and tables that looked like it was used by golfers as somewhere to relax. As they ran past the main body of the building, they noticed a light that came from what looked like an entirely separate house. Almost. It was attached to the grand house, made from a reddish brick like it had been built in the 50s. It had been stuck on and looked like a regular semi-detached house you would see in the suburbs all over the country. A clothesline hung outside and a child's bicycle was propped up against the house. Without a second thought, Carl banged heavily on the blue wooden door that looked as if it hadn't been painted in decades. There was a silence, followed by a man's raised voice from the other side of the door as he approached. It sounded like he was shouting at someone. The door opened just a little, and a tall man's eyes appeared in the crack. "What do you want?" "Sir, I'm really sorry, but we've been attacked. We were in the woods and this—" "What were you doing in the woods at this time?" said the man nastily. "We were just walking, you know." "No. And you smell of booze. Are you drunk?" "A bit, yes, but honestly, this big guy came after us with a knife and— Please, can you help us?" The man's inquisitive eyes looked them up and down again. Slowly he opened his door. He was very tall, leaning on his doorway casually. He wore a grey suit jacket, and underneath was a light blue shirt. He itched the stubble on his chin. His hair was black, but on top he'd dyed it. The grey roots showed themselves around his ears. He had the air of a man who had never left the 50s, even though he'd never experienced them. Carl was closest and could smell cigarettes on him. "I guess you want to come in and use my phone. I don't like making calls at this time of night, but if what you say is true, then best make that call. Come on, all of you, get in." He didn't move out of the way. He stood on the door frame with his arms across the door. Carl was forced to duck under his arm as he entered, so was Ray and Toulouse, but Marco was a little taller. As he went to walk in, the man stared hard at Marco and breathed in, making him rise half an inch. "Go on then, get in," said the man, moving his arms reluctantly. The man took a little look around the dark golf course and smiled, then quietly closed his door. The house was dark and smelt like wet dog, but they could see no dog. As Carl breathed, he could feel the filth making him a little wheezy almost immediately. In a distant room, a television could be heard. "That's it, down there. Keep going towards the kitchen." "Not in there!" "Jesus Christ, boy! Yeah, there, fucking hell!" muttered the man. All five of them walked into a large room that was a dining room and kitchen all in one. A round wooden table on a green carpet was on one side. On the other was the kitchen, with pink walls and cheap-looking cupboards that looked like they hadn't been changed in decades. There was junk everywhere. Children's play toys were all over the worktops, dirty glasses upon the dining room drawers, newspapers and magazines laid around, which made a lot of sense. It was almost certain they didn't have the internet. They were probably afraid of it. "Phone's there, on the worktop by the sink." "Go on, use it," said the man, walking into the dining area and pulling out a chair from the table. He sat down and began to really stare at Carl. His face was not welcoming. There was an undercurrent of disdain. Carl wondered why he was even doing this. He had a phone in his pocket. How had he got there? At the time it made sense, to get inside to safety, when a man with a knife had been chasing them. But as he looked at the man across the room, he didn't feel safe. "You know what? It's actually okay. I have a phone in my pocket, so I can just use that," said Carl. "What? Then why are you here?" said the man standing. His jaw looked tense, and he seemed to be chewing on something. His eyes were hard like concrete, and Carl looked at his hands. They were clenched. "What's going on in here?" said a woman's voice from the door leading towards the corridor. Appearing there was a fat woman in a corset and big dress. Her cheeks were red and puffy, her eyes small, even though they were magnified by glasses with thick lenses. "Doreen, go back to your show. I've got this," said the man. "Oh, nonsense, Derek. I want to see what's going on here." There was a silence. Everyone seemed to be looking at one another. The four students waited to see what the house owners wanted next, but they didn't say anything. Then came the sound of little feet running quickly down the corridor. Appearing from behind their mother, clutching a leg each, was two small children. They were blonde and only in their underwear. They had bowl-cut hairstyles and looked like they could have been twins. "Mummy, who are these?" said the little boy. "These are our guests for tonight." "Aren't they lovely?" said the woman, with a bizarre porcelain face that never seemed to really change expression. It was stuck with some weird demented smile, the opposite of her husband's face, who appeared perpetually angered. "How about you guys? Come take a seat round this table," said Derek. "Look, we don't want to stay. If I can just make this phone call and—" said Carl. "Sit!" screamed the woman. Her face looked crazed, her eyes widened, and her cheeks had gotten redder. "To hell with this, come on," said Ray, taking Toulou's hand and walking towards the corridor they had just entered. Behind him, Ray heard the man moving, but he didn't look. He walked up to the woman with a crazed look, and seemed to be looking through him, standing firm in the doorway, with the children beside her not letting him pass. "Move, now," said Ray, with as much authority as he could muster. But the woman remained like a statue. "Don't you dare talk to my wife like that," said the man. "Tell your bitch to move now," said Ray. Ray, stop. Just look," said Marco gently. Ray turned slowly and looked at the man in the dining room. In the dim light, he could see a shotgun was pointing at him. "You going to say sorry to my wife?" Ray let go of Toulou's hand and raised his arms in surrender. I'm sorry." "Say sorry, Doreen." I'm sorry, Doreen." "That's better. Now the lot of you, come sit at this table, and I want everyone round it. That includes you, Megan and Kevin. Doreen, get some ice cream. You guys like ice cream, right?" "Course you do. 8 bowls of ice cream, Doreen. We can even put chocolate sprinkles on top of it if you want. And maybe some strawberry sauce. I like that, yes indeed I do." "Now sit," said the man, waving the gun at the seats. The main lighting in the dining room had been switched on. All 8 sat around the table. On one side there were the 4 students, the bowls of ice cream in front of them, untouched. Opposite them was the family. At one end was the father with his shotgun, laying upon the table. In the middle was his 2 children, almost standing on their chairs, staring inquisitively at their guests, with white ice cream all over their lips. "I say, Mother, that really was some lovely ice cream. Shame these guys won't touch it. You're really missing out," said Derek, taking a napkin and lightly touching the edge of his lips, then putting his metal spoon in his empty bowl. "Take your eyes off my gun," said Derek, glaring at Ray. "What's wrong with you, boy? I can see anger in your eyes. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit." Now, Daddy. They're just a little shaken, that's all. So, you say you saw someone in the woods out there. What were you doing in the woods in the first place, may I ask?" said Doreen, smiling. "That's what I said," said Derek, picking up his gun and collecting the empty bowls from the family's side, taking them to the kitchen. "And I can tell you've been drinking. You look awful, the lot of you." "And I would have expected better from you, dear," said Doreen towards Toulou. "Spending time in the woods drinking with boys. What would your mother say?" Toulou just looked down at the table, her hair covering her face. "Oi!" shouted Derek from the kitchen. Toulou jumped and looked up. "When my wife speaks to you, you speak back. Do you understand?" Toulou nodded with watery, glistening eyes that had been crying quietly. "Oh dear, you're beautiful too." "I shouldn't be so surprised. It's always the pretty ones that go playing with the boys. Isn't she pretty, darling?" "Yeah, she's pretty for sure. Stupid though," said Derek, meandering back to the table with his gun. "Oh, I bet she's not stupid. Not really stupid anyway. Come on, darling, say something. I want to hear you speak," said Doreen, leaning her elbows upon the table. I don't know what you want me to say," said Toulou. "Oh my God, you're French. How lovely is that?" said Doreen. "Mummy," said the little girl, reaching over and tugging her mother's arm. "What is it, Megan?" "Can I keep her?" said the little girl. At that moment Toulou stopped sniffling. Her eyes grew large. She looked at her 3 friends, then the gun. Perhaps it was the fact the alcohol was wearing off. Perhaps it was what the girl had just said. But it was at the moment she realised how messed up it was, how weird and strange, how dangerous this situation they found themselves in was. "What is wrong with you people? What the hell is wrong with you? Let us go! Let us go!" she screamed. At that moment there was a deafening noise. Toulou felt the warm patter of liquid on her cheeks. She took in a deep breath, stunned, not sure why, then felt the strange, unmistakable taste of blood in her mouth. She turned slowly to see where that huge noise had come from. Sitting beside her was the body of her ex-boyfriend. Just the body. His head had gone. All she could see was the barrel of Derek's shotgun pointing at where his head had once been. She didn't get the chance to scream. Her head fell forward and hit the ice cream bowl in front of her as she passed out. Carl and Marco were both experiencing something like a panic attack. Marco shit and pissed his pants. Carl only pissed himself. His bowels had been evacuated earlier. Marco collapsed off the side of his chair, but retained consciousness and subconsciously crawled towards the corridor. Derek got up from the table and stuck the hot end of the barrel against the back of Marco's head. "Hold it right there. I wish you and your friends would speak with a little more manners. Then I wouldn't have to make all this mess, would I?" "I'm sorry, honey," said Derek, looking at his wife. Doreen sat frozen at the table with a splash of raised blood all across her face. "Don't worry, darling." "Mummy, can I keep him?" said the blood-covered toddler boy, pointing at Carl. Carl sat with his teeth chattering and his eyes moving rapidly around the room. "I can't see why not. That seems fair to me. One each. What do you think, Daddy?" said Doreen to her husband. "I don't see a problem with that. As long as I get this one," said Derek, pushing the gun harder into the back of Marco's head. "Oh, that's fine." "Sorry, dear. If I hadn't shot that one's head off, you could have kept him. One each. That would be much fairer. Do you forgive me?" "Of course, darling, I do," said Doreen, getting up and kissing her husband on the cheek. "Right," said Derek, reaching over towards the key holder by the back door. He took a dog chain that hung there, then slipped it around Marco's neck, who was still on his hands and knees. "Good boy. Come on, let's go," said Derek, whistling. Marco walked with him down the corridor towards the front door. When Tallulah awoke, the first glimmer of light came through a window behind her, high up in the far end of the room. The first thing she noticed was the taste of something on her tongue. Was that fabric? She opened her eyes as she felt the breeze on her legs. She looked down and saw she was completely naked. Then it all rushed in at once. She felt the rope tying her hands together around her back. She felt the wooden chair she was sat on. She felt her ankles tied to it and remembered how she got there. The image of Ray's headless body rushed into her mind. She jolted and closed her eyes as if it would repulse the image, but it didn't work. The horrifying memory remained. She'd been gagged to stop her screams. She moved her head as much as she could around the room, but there was little distinguishable character. A beige carpet beneath her and a metal fan in front of her that wasn't turned on. The room was humid. Summer heat in a room where a window hadn't been opened in a week. The heat that made you sweat, and that's precisely what it was doing. Half from fear, half from the sweltering atmosphere. In front of her was a doorway, but it was too dark inside to see properly. She felt as if it was around 5 in the morning. A little more time passed. The light increased slightly. Her head had gone down, but her body was tired. But pain and anxiety burned relentlessly in her stomach. Then, "Hello," came the little girl's voice from the doorway. She was in pink pyjamas, rubbing her eyes like she had just woken up. The girl walked up to Tallulah. Even though she was sat, her head was a little higher than the girl's. The girl touched Tallulah's hair, stroking it, then putting it against her own blonde hair, comparing the contrasting colours. "I wish I could untie you, so we could play properly. But then you would run away, so I can't do that," said the little girl. The little girl left the room for a moment, and when she came back, she had pieces of paper and a colouring set. She put them down and showed Tallulah her pictures, holding them up so her wild eyes could see. The drawings was that of a child's, scruffy crayons in different colours. "Do you like it? That's me and all the flowers. I like flowers. I can see them from the front window, but Mummy doesn't let me go out. I'm not supposed to look out the window. But one day, I hope I can go out and touch them for real. But until then, I can always draw them," said the girl with a weak smile. Then Tallulah heard something at the doorway. There was the little girl's brother in his blue pyjamas, but it's what was beside him that made her cry. Tied up, with a rope around his ankles, knees and wrists, was Carl. He stood completely naked, quivering. Around his neck was a rope. It was like a leash that the boy held onto. In his mouth, a dirty cloth gagged him. "Come on, boy," said the boy, whistling, then tugging, bringing Carl into the room. It was then Tallulah noticed the knife the boy was holding. The boy was about 7, big enough to threaten Carl with it. Carl hopped in with the little lad, who joined his sister. "Why's mine keep crying?" said the little girl. "I don't know, but she started again when she looked at mine. Maybe they like each other. Maybe we should get them to play with each other. What do you think?" said the boy. "Yeah, but how?" said the girl. When Daddy's upset, he likes his snake playing with. Maybe if we get her to play with his snake." "Yeah, let's try it," said the girl. The boy tugged Carl closer to Tallulah. "That's it, boy. Put it there. That's it. Near her mouth. She should use her mouth, right?" said the boy. "Yeah, but she can't use her mouth because of the cloth. We can't remove it because Mummy and Daddy won't be happy with that," said the little girl. It's not working. "Oh, look, now mine's crying," said the boy. "Why are you crying, boy?" "Ah, to hell with this. I'm bored with him." The little boy took his knife, and Carl could see what was coming. He hopped as hard as he could to get away, but the boy kept a tight grip of the rope. The rope tensed, and Carl fell flat on his back like a plank of wood, and the boy was propelled closer to Carl. "You've really done it now," said the little boy. Carl rolled the only way he could in an attempt to get away, but it just left him laying on his front. The little boy raised the blade high and drove it into Carl's lower back, forcing the metal through one of his kidneys. A muffled scream came from Carl, then to Lou. Both thrashed, but it was useless. The restraints were too tight. "Can I have a go?" said the little girl. "Sure," said the boy, handing the dripping blade to his sister. The girl copied her brother, but using the other side of Carl's back, splitting open his other kidney. The two children took turns, feeling him go limp as blood ran onto the beige carpet, turning it a strange reddish brown. Toulouse closed her eyes, but she saw everything in her mind, listening to the cries of her friend get quieter and quieter and quieter. The toddlers had left the room for some time. In that time, Toulouse had opened her eyes just twice. She couldn't bear to look at the floor. When she had, she couldn't believe how pale Carl's body was now. The room was lighter now, but it had a strange yellow ambience she didn't understand. It was because the back windows had a filter on it, making it difficult for people to see in. She then heard someone come into the room. She didn't want to open her eyes, but she had to. The little girl was there. She had a black box with her, and she walked up to Toulouse, climbing over Carl's body like it was nothing. Toulouse looked at the blood on the little girl's hands and wanted to cry, but the tears had run out. "I was thinking why it didn't work earlier. Maybe you didn't like the way you looked. I see Mummy putting this stuff on, so I wondered if you wanted some." The girl opened the black box. Inside it was makeup, lipstick, mascara, eyelash curlers. The girl took out a stick of lipstick, undid the top, and applied it to Toulouse's lips. "Stop shaking, it's hard. I wish I could take out that cloth, but I can't. Daddy will get angry," she said, trying her best but making an awful mess. "And there, that's it. Wait there, I'm going to get a mirror," said the little girl, running out the room. Toulouse relaxed. It wasn't a good relax, it was a giving up relax, from her body and mind too exhausted, too tormented. But then she heard heavy steps at the doorway, something different. The sound of big boots coming to a halt. Slowly she looked up. There was the tall man from the woods. His head almost touched the top of the doorframe. He looked at Toulouse with a pervert's smile. Again, saliva began to drool from his chin. The little girl then appeared at his feet. She looked up at him and screamed, "No, she's mine!" But with that, he grabbed her by the collar and slung her back behind him. She flew across the room, colliding with the cabinet, then laying upon the floor completely lifeless. The tall man with a deranged, drooling grin took long strides into the room, giggling with them long weird fingers stretched out. He got on his knees, grinning widely, his head the same height as Toulouse. He began to untie her, first at the ankles, then he moved round to the back of her, and he began to untie her wrists. Toulouse didn't move. As he untied her, she heard his deep demonic giggling grow louder. As the last knot came undone, she lunged forward. The tall man jumped up and come to grab his prize. His long fingers wrapped themselves around her shoulders, turning her around. That's when she plunged the blade into his stomach. He hadn't been watching properly. He hadn't seen her take the knife from Carl's back. The blade slipped into his intestines and he stumbled back. Toulouse turned. She didn't think, she just ran, yanking the cloth from her mouth, sprinting through the doorway, down the dark corridor into the wooden door. She slammed into the hard wood and grasped the metal handle, turning it frantically, but it wouldn't budge. Then she heard a cry behind her. "Daddy, she's got free! Daddy!" Toulouse banged upon the door with her fists, screaming, "No, no, no, please!" She then noticed the brass key in the keyhole. She turned it, and the handle moved, and the door opened. She threw herself through the door and slammed it behind her. Toulouse was completely naked, staggering. She looked up at a chandelier above her and felt soft red carpet on her feet. Around her, a dozen men in golf attire stared. The room fell completely silent. Then, the only other girl stood up from the reception desk. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Toulouse looked to her side where she could see daylight. She looked out to the entrance, down a long driveway that led to a road where cars were passing by in the distance. She sprinted, out of the building down the driveway, not caring about the hard stones that were cutting her feet. From inside a green Porsche in the car park, Jack Winchester took his hand from his nose, seeing if the smell had gone after the fourth wash he'd given it. It was then he saw a flash of flesh run past his car. He watched the naked woman running down the driveway and wondered, what is this world coming to?